Michael Carter stepped into the gleaming lobby of Sterling and Rowe Global, clutching his ID badge a little too tightly. It was his first day, the culmination of 4 years of night classes, side gigs, and sacrifices made by his mother, who taught him to speak with pride, even if his words didn't sound like everyone else. The glass doors parted like a ceremony. The marble floor stretched ahead like a promise. But the moment he spoke, "Good morning," the receptionist tilted her head. "Oh, that's unique." The elevator ride was silent, except for the occasional glance toward him. As he introduced himself at the morning huddle, someone muttered, "Where's the subtitle option?" Laughter, da. Quick and sharp. His cheeks burned, but he smiled. He always smiled. He had worked too hard to belong here. Yet something in the air shifted. Not hate, not malice, something worse. Mockery disguised as banter. As Michael walked to his desk, the office buzzed behind him. He wondered if they saw him, or just heard his voice. That evening, Michael rode the train home, slumped against the window, the city flickering past in fading gold and cold steel. He replayed the day. Every chuckle, every side glance, every moment he heard his voice, and wished it sounded different. He remembered his mother's voice saying, "Never be ashamed of where we come from." But the echo of that boardroom laughter mocked it all. A group of teens nearby joked loudly in local slang, laughing freely, unapologetically. Michael envied them, not for their words but for how little they cared how they sounded. When he got off at his stop, the sky had turned a pale navy. He walked slowly home, his bag heavier than usual. His apartment window glowed warmly from the distance. Inside was his mother, probably stirring stew on the stove, probably waiting with questions. Michael inhaled and fixed his face into a smile, the same one he wore all day. Michael stepped through the front door. The scent of cumin and garlic hit him like a memory. His mother, Janelle, stood in the kitchen, apron on, eyes tired but warm. "How was it?" she asked. He hesitated. "Good," he lied. She nodded, stirring the pot, knowing better. Dinner was quiet. They talked about rent, her medications, the neighbors' loud music. Not a word about the office. Afterward, Michael sat on the couch, scrolling aimlessly. His phone buzzed, a meme from a coworker. It was a video mocking foreign accents. The caption read, "Today's team meeting vibes." Michael froze. He clicked on the sender, Jared. The same guy who had laughed loudest in the meeting. He stared at the screen, then turned it off. Across the room, Janelle said softly, "Don't let them change you, baby. Your voice is power." Michael looked at her, then away. He didn't feel powerful. He felt like vanishing. Later that night, Michael sat on his bed, phone screen lighting his face in the dark. He played back a voicemail from his mother, one from a few months ago. Her voice sang in their native Jamaican patois, telling him to be proud, to stand tall, to shine. He smiled faintly. Then, he opened a browser tab and typed, "How to reduce accent." Video after video loaded. American accent tutorials, tongue exercises, elocution guides. He clicked one. A woman instructed, "Flatten your vowels, soften your consonants, hide your native rhythm." Michael repeated after her quietly. Again. Again. The screen reflected in his eyes, slowly replacing his mother's voice with another's. His voice didn't sound like his own anymore. But maybe, just maybe, it would make them stop laughing. The next morning, Michael arrived 10 minutes early, dressed sharper, voice softer. "Hey, mornin'," he said to a coworker. They nodded, no smirk this time. In the meeting he spoke carefully, each word rehearsed. His boss smiled. "Nice improvement, Carter." But when he sat back down, Jared whispered, "Congrats, you finally sound like one of us." Another chuckle. Michael's stomach sank. No matter how he bent his voice, they still saw him as different. He realized they didn't want him clearer, they wanted him invisible. That night he deleted the accent training videos. Then, he opened the recorder app on his phone. He spoke into it. Just a few lines. In his own voice. My name is Michael Carter. I was born in Kingston. And I speak like this. He played it back. It didn't fix anything. But for once he didn't cringe. Michael became quieter. Not out of shyness but strategy. At meetings, he rehearsed lines in his head before speaking. In the break room, he stood at the edge of conversations, nodding, laughing when others laughed, even when he didn't understand the joke. One afternoon, while pouring coffee, he overheard Jared again. It's cute, like Siri, but with a Caribbean filter. Laughter followed. Michael didn't flinch. He stirred his coffee slowly and walked out. At his desk, he typed emails with robotic precision. Said, "Thanks so much," with a practiced cadence on every call. Every vowel rounded. Every R softened. He was becoming fluent in invisibility. But at night his voice returned. In phone calls to his mother. In dreams. In silence it still belonged to him. But at work, it had become a costume. Tight and itching, but necessary. He didn't want to be laughed at. So he stayed silent. Janelle noticed the shift. "You're speaking like them," she said over dinner, watching Michael carefully. He shrugged, slicing through his chicken. "Just trying to keep up," he muttered. She shook her head. "They'll take everything from you if you let them, even your tongue." He didn't respond. That night, Michael stared at himself in the mirror, repeating phrases in an accent not his own. "Thank you for reaching out. Let's circle back. Touch base soon." His reflection stared back, unfamiliar. He turned off the light and sat in the dark. Outside, sirens passed. Inside, everything was quiet. At work, they praised his adaptability. His manager smiled. "You're really settling in." But each compliment felt like a cut. They didn't know how hard it was to unlearn the rhythm of your own people, to trade culture for comfort. Michael wondered, was fitting in the same as disappearing? At the quarterly team lunch, everyone sat around a long glass table in the executive dining room. Michael chose his words carefully, answering with safe, sanitized language. But mid-conversation, one colleague asked, "So where's your accent from again?" He froze. Half the table turned to look. Before he could answer, Jared grinned and said, "Bro, you know that Rihanna Island or something?" The table erupted with laughter. Michael tried to smile, but it cracked. "Jamaica," he said quietly. "I was born there." Someone mimicked a reggae jingle under their breath. The laughter kept going. His manager chuckled too, not cruelly, but carelessly. Michael stared at his untouched plate. The laughter faded, but the burn remained. He had become the joke, the moment of levity, in a corporate routine. He wasn't being heard. He was being tolerated. Later that week, during a late shift, Michael sat alone finishing a project. Nadia, a marketing analyst, entered the room. She was quiet, focused, her accent subtle, her presence sharp. She glanced at his screen, then said, "They mocked mine too." Michael looked up. "Your accent?" She nodded. "When I started, I'm from Nairobi. They called it charming, then told me to sound more professional." They talked for hours. Nadia shared her strategies, slowing her speech, dropping certain phrases, blending in. "But it never really works," she said. "They still hear what they want." Michael listened. She wasn't angry, just tired. "Speak soft, smile more, vanish," she whispered. For the first time in weeks, Michael didn't feel alone. "You ever think about quitting?" he asked. She smiled, thin and bitter. "Every day, but I need the paycheck more than I need their approval." On Friday, Michael skipped the after-hours happy hour. Instead, he sat on a park bench under the quiet dusk sky, headphones on, playing old voicemails from home. His mother singing. His cousin telling jokes. His uncle's advice, thick with dialect. He missed the way they sounded, raw, real, unfiltered. A couple walked by, laughing freely. He turned down the volume and just listened, to the city, to the wind, to himself. In that silence, something stirred. Not defiance. Not anger. Just grief. The slow death of something unspoken. Not his career. Not even his pride. His voice. His voice had been edited, shrunk, polished for their comfort. And in the process he had silenced the boy who used to speak with color. That night, he made a promise. He wouldn't fight yet. But he'd remember. He wouldn't forget the sound of home. Michael stopped calling home as often. Every conversation with his mother made him feel like a fraud. She'd ask, "How's work, baby?" And he'd answer in a flattened, clipped voice. She'd pause, then respond slower, like trying to recognize him in a crowd. That night, she said, "You sound like someone else." He didn't respond. Instead, he stared at the ceiling long after the call ended. At work, his silence had become normal. He was praised for being easygoing, low maintenance, a team player. He started to wonder if disappearing was the only way to stay. The company issued a diversity newsletter. On the cover, a smiling black employee from another office. Underneath, bold letters read, "We celebrate every voice." Michael stared at it for a long time, then tossed it in the bin. No one had ever celebrated his. And he wasn't sure they ever would. In the office, Michael's invisibility grew. His ideas were often echoed louder by someone else. A suggestion he made in a Monday meeting showed up later that week in a memo, credited to Jared. No one blinked. At lunch, he sat alone, earbuds in, pretending to listen to music. He wasn't. He was listening to how others spoke, how they phrased things, where they paused, how they used humor like armor. He began to mimic them without realizing it. One day he made a joke in their style. They laughed. It worked. And it made him sick. He felt like a shadow of himself, a collage of borrowed tones, stolen cadence. When he heard himself back on a voicemail, he didn't recognize the voice. It was polished, performative, like someone auditioning for a part. A stranger in his own throat. One afternoon while helping prep for a client presentation, Michael passed by the break room and heard it. Jared again, mimicking Michael's accent, wildly exaggerated, turning every sentence into a joke. "Gay day." He laughed, slapping a desk as others chuckled. No one stopped him. No one looked shocked. Michael froze, back turned to the door. His fists clenched, heart pounding. But he didn't enter. He walked back to his desk, sat down, and stared at the screen. The laughter echoed from down the hall. He opened a blank document. For a second, he typed, "To whom it may concern," but his hands trembled. He deleted the words. He wasn't ready. Not yet. That night he recorded the voice he heard in the hallway, not on his phone, but in his memory. He would not forget this. He didn't need proof. He needed resolve. That weekend, Michael sat on a bench outside a downtown cafe, waiting for Nadia. She arrived 10 minutes late, her stride brisk, her face unreadable. "I filed a report," she said, no greeting. "I didn't name you." Michael blinked. "Why not?" She shrugged. "You're not ready, but I am." She sipped her coffee and looked straight ahead. "They won't do much, but I needed it on record." Michael nodded, silent. Nadia continued, "You don't have to speak yet, but don't forget how they made you feel." For a long time, they sat in silence. Around them, people talked freely, laughter, accents, arguments. The city pulsed. Nadia finally stood. "When you're ready, say something. Don't wait for their permission." She walked off, leaving Michael with a heart full of fire and a mind tangled in fear. That night, Michael returned to the office, late when no one was around. He stood in the empty boardroom, silent. The echo of his footsteps felt strange, surreal. He approached the glass wall and looked out over the city lights. Then, slowly, he spoke. Not in his polished, careful voice. In his real one. "My name is Michael Carter, I was born in Kingston. I am not your joke. He paused, then repeated it. Again. Louder. I am not your joke. The walls didn't laugh. The ceiling didn't snicker. Only the silence answered, and it was kind. For the first time he heard his voice not as something to be hidden, but something to be claimed. He didn't care who heard. He walked out without looking back. And for the first time since he got the job, he walked like he belonged. Monday morning came like a test. Michael entered the office and didn't drop his voice. Not this time. In meetings he spoke clearly, with intention, with rhythm. His accent softened only by fatigue, not fear. When he presented his findings, his voice held steady. Some coworkers glanced up. One whispered. Jared made a smirk and looked away. But his manager said, "Good work, Carter," with no sarcasm. Later, in the hallway, Nadia passed him and offered a subtle nod. He returned it. He didn't make a speech. He didn't demand applause. But something shifted. His posture was different. Shoulders back. Chin lifted. The whispers didn't sting as deeply. He wasn't trying to sound like them anymore. He was trying to sound like himself. And that was a kind of rebellion. Quiet. Steady. Real. Later that day, Michael recorded his next team meeting. Not for revenge, for protection. He'd read the policy manual carefully. Consent not required in public workplace settings, it said. His phone stayed face down on the desk, voice memo app running silently. Jared spoke again. A snide comment. Something about translation required. A few chuckled. Michael didn't react. He continued the presentation. Afterward, he saved the file under a code, 4.2, incident, MP3. That night he copied it to a cloud folder labeled Voice Matters. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. But for the first time he was archiving the proof. Not just of what they said, but of who he was when they said it. He wasn't gathering evidence of their cruelty. He was preserving the moments he chose not to break. That evening, Michael opened an old notebook from college, the one filled with quotes, accents, dialect notes, and phonetic scribbles. He used to study voices, not erase them. He had once wanted to be a linguist. As a teen he'd record neighbors' stories, fascinated by how language carried memory. Now, flipping through the worn pages, he saw a version of himself he missed. Curious, proud, unafraid. He sat at his desk, hit record again, and began speaking, his story in his voice. I was born in Kingston. My mother taught me to speak boldly. Then I came here, and they told me bold was wrong. He paused, then continued. Not for TikTok. Not for pity. But because the voice he'd buried was still alive, and it had something to say. The next morning, Michael found a sticky note on his monitor. It read, "Loved what you said in the meeting yesterday. Don't stop." No name. Just handwriting he didn't recognize. He read it twice. Then again. It was small, barely a breath. But it was enough. In the break room, a quiet co-worker, Priya, made space for him at her table. "Can I sit?" he asked. She smiled. Should have joined ages ago. They talked about books, bad coffee, and growing up between cultures. Nothing about accents. Nothing about code switching. Just connection. For the first time in weeks, Michael laughed, full-bodied, unpolished. It startled even him. He left the break room lighter. There was power in truth. And truth, it seemed, attracted truth. That afternoon, Michael opened a new email draft. The subject line was simple: formal workplace complaint. His hand hovered over the keyboard. He wasn't afraid, just aware. Aware of what this meant. Once sent, there was no returning to silence. He didn't name names. Not yet. But he detailed patterns, moments, tone. He attached no files, just words. His words. Measured. Firm. Honest. Before sending, he reread it one last time, then clicked Save as Draft. He wasn't done building, but the foundation was there. He stepped away from his desk and looked out the window, city skyline steady in the distance. He felt the storm coming, but for once, he wasn't afraid of being heard. He was afraid of staying quiet. And that fear, he realized, was the one he could finally leave behind. The performance review arrived on a Thursday, sterile, clinical, and full of vague phrasing. Communication inconsistent. Needs to adjust tone for team harmony. Michael read the document twice. It didn't mention missed deadlines or poor work. Just tone, cadence, presence, dale. He took it home, laid it beside his older reviews, all glowing. The shift was obvious. At the bottom, his manager had written, "Potential for leadership if professional development continues." Translation: adapt more, soften more, disappear more. He didn't sign it. Not yet. The next morning, HR scheduled a meeting. "Just to discuss your trajectory," they said. He smiled through it. But he felt it, the shift from tolerated to targeted. The moment you stop performing, they stop pretending. He started printing emails, saving chats, a digital paper trail. It wasn't paranoia. It was self-defense. Nadia had vanished. No announcement. No farewell email. Michael found out when her desk sat empty Friday morning, her nameplate gone. A junior intern whispered, "They said she asked to transfer." Michael knew better. Later that afternoon, he received an email inviting him to a voluntary culture training. Voluntary. Mandatory. Full. Same thing. He clicked it shut. That night, he got a message from Nadia. Just one line: "Don't trust the silence." It's loaded. He stared at it, rereading it like scripture. He walked into the stairwell, away from cameras, and called her. "Why'd you leave?" She answered simply, "Because I fought. And now they're freezing me out." He asked, "Should I stop?" She said nothing for a while, then added, "You already started." The line went dead. The silence that followed was louder than anything. That weekend, Michael uploaded a clip anonymously, just 6 seconds from a team meeting. Jared, mid-joke, mimicking Michael's voice, exaggerated and cartoonish. Laughter followed. Faces blurred. Voices clear. He posted it on a small social media account with a caption, "This happens more often than you think." He didn't use his name. Didn't name the company. Within 24 hours, it had 22,000 views. Then 80,000. Then the media requests began. By Monday, the clip had reached a national page about workplace bias. The company scrambled. HR sent an email to all staff. "We are committed to fostering an inclusive culture." Mandatory meetings were scheduled. Jared didn't show up to work that day. Michael did. He sat at his desk, opened his email, and waited. Not afraid. Not proud. Just ready. The press requests poured in, but Michael said nothing. Still anonymous. Still silent. But the office changed overnight. Eyes lingered longer. Conversation stopped when he entered a room. Someone from legal asked to speak, off the record. They wanted to know what he had, and if more was coming. "We take this seriously," they said. He nodded. "I'm sure you do." The CEO released a memo. Apologies. Promises. An external investigation is underway. But Michael saw it for what it was: damage control. They didn't want accountability. They wanted quiet. Nadia texted again. "They'll offer you something soon. Money, position, and data. Be careful." He replied, "I'm not selling silence." He walked past the HR office that afternoon and met the director's gaze. She looked away first. By week's end, Michael was suspended, pending investigation. No notice. No notice. Just a calendar invite for a final HR meeting and a system lockout that followed. He packed his things slowly, methodically. Around him, eyes watched but mouths stayed shut. One colleague whispered, "This isn't right." Another just looked away. As he left, he paused at the glass doors, looking back one last time. Not with regret, but clarity. They wanted to make him an example, but they'd made him a witness. On the train home, he wrote the outline of his story. No names yet. No legal action filed. But the words came freely now. His voice, full, precise, unapologetic. He whispered the title out loud, testing it on his tongue. They mocked my accent at work. And for the first time in a long time, it sounded like the truth. The story broke wide on Monday. A national workplace equity podcast picked up the anonymous clip. Then a journalist confirmed the company. The headline read, "Silenced in the boardroom, mockery behind the glass." Michael woke to hundreds of notifications. His inbox flooded, reporters, lawyers, strangers sharing stories. One email stood out. "I heard your voice. I recognized it. Thank you for not backing down." By noon, the company trended online. I sent another company-wide memo. An inclusive environment is our top priority. But this time, no one bought it. Staff Slack channels buzzed. Screenshots circulated. A coalition of current and former employees began forming. Michael remained silent publicly, but the world had found his voice, and it refused to unhear it. That afternoon, a local journalist reached out for comment. Michael declined the interview, but sent a statement. "They didn't fire me for misconduct. They silenced me for speaking plainly." Within hours, it was everywhere. Radio, Twitter, HR forums. Podcasts quoted him. Public pressure grew. A civil rights organization contacted him. "We're watching this closely. If you want legal action, we can help." Michael hesitated. He wasn't chasing revenge. But he wasn't afraid anymore either. He met with their lawyer in a quiet cafe. No suit, no pretense. Just facts. "They'll offer you a settlement," the lawyer warned. "But this could be bigger than money." Michael nodded. "I don't want hush money. I want the next guy to speak without fear." The lawyer paused, smiled faintly and said, "Then let's make it loud." By midweek, Michael's voice hit national airwaves. The podcast host introduced him not by name but by story. A young man who was told to speak like someone else just to survive. The clip played. Then, silence. Then, applause. Not for performance. For truth. Michael listened from home, headphones on, heart pounding. The host continued, "What does it say about us, when professionalism means erasure?" That quote was picked up by blogs, opinion columns, even morning news. Michael didn't celebrate. He sat by the window, staring into the distance. He didn't want fame. He wanted accountability. A message from Priya popped up. "You said what we were all too scared to." Michael replied, "Not scared anymore." Across the city, more people spoke up. The whisper became a wave. That night, Nadia returned. Not to the company, but to the public fight. She wrote an op-ed titled "Polished Silence," and it went viral. "We weren't hired to speak freely," she wrote. "We were hired to speak safely, for them." Michael read every word. Then he called her. "You wrote it like a knife," he said. She replied, "No, like a mirror." The next morning, Michael and Nadia appeared together on a live stream panel about voice bias. Thousands tuned in. They spoke without softening. No edits. No filters. And the audience didn't mock them. They listened. When the moderator asked Michael what he wanted now, he answered plainly, "I want kids who sound like me to know their voice isn't a liability, is a language of survival." The chat exploded in support. By Friday, the company folded. An internal investigation leaked. Emails surfaced. Old complaints. Redacted performance reviews. Slurs in chat logs. The truth cracked open the walls. The CEO made a statement, carefully worded, legally safe. But it was too late. The damage wasn't just public, it was personal. For every Michael, every Nadia, every unnamed voice that had shrunk itself to survive. Michael stood on the courthouse steps with a lawyer beside him. Nyeh. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. He didn't answer. Just read from a printed page. This is not about one company. This is about all of them. The ones who confuse conformity with professionalism, whose policies protect only comfort, not culture. We won't be quiet anymore. Then he stepped down, folded the page and walked away. Head high. Michael walked out of the courthouse, not as a victim, not as a headline, but as himself. The trial didn't end in millions, but it ended publicly. The apology was recorded. The NDA was refused. His voice had gone from buried to broadcast. Cameras followed him down the steps, but he didn't stop. A reporter shouted, "Do you think justice was served?" He paused, turned slightly and said, "Justice is a process, not a performance." Then he kept walking. That night, he sat alone with his mother, their hands quietly joined across the kitchen table. She hadn't said much through all of it. But now she looked at him and whispered, "You sound like yourself again." He smiled, not for the cameras, not for the cause. Just for her. The battle wasn't over. But his silence was. Back at home, Michael unpacked the box from his final day, mug, framed photo, a worn-out notebook. He placed it all on a new desk. Not in an office. In a room, above a community center. A place he rented to start a voice mentorship group. The first session wasn't flashy. 4 chairs. 1 circle. No microphones. No buzzwords. Just people, immigrants, young professionals, poets, speaking without fear of being corrected. Michael listened more than he spoke. He heard accents thick with history, with rhythm, with roots. Don't change to fit, he told them. Change the room if it won't hold you. They nodded. They laughed. One woman cried. The air felt safe, not professional, not polished, just real. And that was the goal now. Not to rise in the system, but to rebuild something outside it. Weeks later, Michael received a package. No return address. Inside was a printed screenshot. A LinkedIn post from Jared. Taking time to reflect, we all have blind spots. Below it, a message from an anonymous sender. You did more than speak, you changed how some of us listen. Michael folded the paper and put it away. He didn't care about apologies anymore. They were never the point. He sat down and opened his laptop. A fresh document blinked back at him. He typed the title, Accent, a Survival Guide. Chapter 1 began, Your voice is not a mistake. It's a map. He smiled. The story wasn't over. It was just changing languages. At a university panel on workplace equity, Michael sat among scholars and executives. When asked how he kept going, he didn't recite stats. He didn't talk policy. He told a story. About a joke. About a meeting. About a voice. The crowd was silent. Not with discomfort, but with recognition. Afterward, a young man approached him. Nervous. Jamaican accent, thick and proud. I never thought I'd see someone like me up there, he said. Michael shook his hand. Then make sure they see you next. The young man nodded, eyes shining. In that moment, Michael understood. The fight hadn't made him weaker. It had clarified him. Every silence, every laugh, every paper trail. It led here. Not to fame, but to visibility. Real, lasting, necessary visibility. One final scene. Michael, older now, stands outside a courthouse again. Not as a defendant. Not as a headline. Just a man watching history repeat. A boy, maybe 18. Exits the doors, suit too big, eyes wide. Michael steps aside to let him pass. Cameras flash behind the boy. Michael turns away, not from indifference, but understanding. He walks down the steps slowly. A voiceover plays in his mind, his own voice, recorded years earlier. Justice isn't blind, it's just expensive. He repeats it aloud this time. Quiet. Clear. The sky overhead is open, gray-blue. As Michael disappears into the crowd, we don't see resolution. We see continuation. Because the story never really ends. But voices, they carry.